Today, President Obama unveiled the actions he plans to take without the consent of Congress to restrict gun use in America. Among them, expanding background checks to almost anyone buying a firearm from a dealer. He says his plans are constitutional. He also said some constraints on freedom are necessary to protect innocent people. And then he got emotional.
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara, and from high schoolers at Columbine, and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day.
Now listen, we all get emotional when you hear children being killed, but where was that emotion for the victims of San Bernardino terror attack? And where's the emotion calling Islamic terror what it is, Islamic, and terrorism? Those tears, Mr. Obama, I think ISIS sees them as emotional strength or weakness. I'm just asking, Juan, do you disagree with me?
Yeah, boy. You think John Boehner was a weak man? No.
I didn't. You're probably the wrong guy to ask.
Okay, I'm just saying. I don't say. To me, I think this is what you want. I mean, Obama. My thing is he's too cool at times, and so if you're asking me as a human being, I just think I don't want to be shot. I don't want to be walking in my neighborhood and some thug pick on. I'm just tired of it.
No, I don't. Believe me, I'm not disagreeing with that aspect of it, KG. What I'm kind of wondering about here is the gun control debate, the argument. When he goes for it, executive action, he opens the door. Does he open the door to more down the road?
Well, of course, and Ryan, this is his kind of favorite go-to. This is the way that he's able to achieve, the outcomes that he wants that are specific to his ideology. I don't begrudge him showing the emotion. He's a father, and anybody talking about children and loss of lives. But I also think about the children and the Christians that are being murdered and beheaded and executed, and disabled children being executed by ISIS. And I want to see our president show that level of emotion and resolve and passion to achieve the ends that we need as far as it relates to national security and keeping Americans safe and doing the right thing, taking the position of power and influence that we have held in the world, that people admire and respect, that we are the ones you call when you are in greatest need. And I see that he has it, but I don't want him to cry about the Second Amendment. I want him to keep the Second Amendment where it is and worry about getting the bad guys that have the guns and not persecuting the guns.
And he did, Greg, he pointed that out. It happens in Chicago every day, but I'm not sure that anything he proposed today would fix what's going on in Chicago every day.
The thing about emotion is, and I do believe it's real, but emotion isn't facts. And one of the facts is in Chicago, for example, police shootings, homicides are down, but other shootings are up. And gang violence is a big problem. But they can't go there on gang violence because, one, if you come from a political background that says every prisoner is a political prisoner, you don't want to put people in prisons. Number two, if you want to cut gang violence, then you have to address the idea of drug legalization, since the overwhelming majority of gun violence are gunfights among gangs. But to these background checks, 2 points. If they are so great, make them free. But they cost anywhere from $60 to $100. The reason why they aren't free is because they feel that the price is a deterrent, but it's a deterrent that would only affect poor people because they can't afford the money. We're still going to get our guns. We're going to pay the fees. But lastly, John Lott put up this amazing study 2 days ago. It's the first ever study of background checks and whether they reduce the risk of these mass public shootings. He looked from 2000 to 2015 and found that additional checks on private transfers of guns raises the risk of these shootings or these deaths, rate of killing, by 80%. So these background checks are actually harmful. This is what's called a hate fact. You hate to hear it because it's true.
Well, what? I don't get it. Explain it to me.
No, you just ran the numbers.
Well, how can that be?
So here's
Yeah,
what
you gotta
happens.
read
Here's what happens. Because of the cost of a background check, you're forcing more people who may not require a background check to now require the background check. That cost goes immediately to the purchaser, right? Because the seller's not going to eat that cost. It's going to go to the purchaser. What happens to the purchaser? He says, I don't want to pay that money for the background check. He's going to go to an illegal gun, or he's not going to get a gun. So therefore, the crime against people in poverty, minorities, et cetera, goes up because of increased regulation of background checks. That's the logic behind the
I think that's convoluted. I mean, I didn't understand what Greg said, but I just think that's convoluted.
Why is it convoluted?
Because
I
think
cost
that
to something, it's going to prohibit a certain group of people from being able to afford to buy it.
Well, if you can afford to buy a gun, I think you can afford the did you say $60? I don't know what the price is. But $60 for a background check.
in DC, I think.
I think that Americans, this is overwhelming. I don't get this. Republicans, gun owners, support background checks.
Hey, I'm for background checks. I hope they work. But I don't see the evidence that they work. By the way, homicides have been cut in half in 25 years anyway with guns. So.
Right. Can we talk about the political ramifications, the fallout of this? Is this a good wedge issue for 2016?
Well, I think the president thinks so, but a couple of things. So they have poll tested this a lot. This is something he's been talking about ever since he was in the state Senate in Illinois. So he knows the issue very well. I think what you saw today was just this, when he welled up with emotion. I recently heard a saying that you can't really know a man's heart until you know what can break it. And Obama hasn't been one that has shown a lot of, at least, emotion, especially when it comes to tears. And so that was a moment, it's almost as if he made eye contact with somebody in the crowd who maybe had been affected by Sandy Hook, and he knows those families, and I can't imagine it would be like having been there, but I wasn't the president. You walk in and you have to give the president bad news, like with Virginia Tech shooting in, I think, 2007 when President Bush was in office. It does affect them because they take it a little bit personally, and that's what President Obama is doing, which is why I don't know exactly how the politics will come out, because making things personal doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to achieve anything. On the Democratic side, it probably helps a little bit in some of those districts and states where you have Democrats running for office that say that they want to be able to point to something President Obama did on the issue that they care about, if it is guns. The interesting thing on the Republican side, though, is that it could actually increase enthusiasm of Republicans to turn out. One of the things I don't understand why the president didn't do this is he has the power to convene. And because there is bipartisan support on some of the issues, when you look at the polling, he could have pulled together a bipartisan group and made the members stand up there with him to say, how are we going to deal with this if we can find any sort of way on mental health?
Why do you think that didn't happen?
I think because I think that he has such a dislike for members of Congress. And you remember the Democratic Senate in 2013, he couldn't pass it. I was going
to raise that point in support of your point.
The politics aren't exactly there. If I could just add one last thing. It was reported that this new action that the president wants to put forward will require the FBI to hire about 230 more agents. Recently, the FBI has told us that we have open investigations with ISIS in all 50 states. I would imagine the FBI director would much rather have 230 more full-time people to be able to help prevent the San Bernardinos that we know are probably coming and being plotted right now than they would be to have them to do more background checks.
But I think it's part of that story. I think if you have better background checks, you can stop some of the people who we talk about here in terms of terrorists and bad people from getting guns. And this also includes, and I would think this would add...
Wait, do terrorists and bad people give background checks? Pay for background checks?
Well, apparently this guy got the guns from a friend, the guy in San Bernardino.
Right, which wouldn't
and
have
I think if they had done background checks, if they had insisted on really...
Didn't stop Aurora, didn't stop Fort Hood.
Didn't stop it, but I'm saying let's not, as the president said today, let's not debate the last one. Let's talk about stopping the next one.
Because if you debate the last one, you are wrong.
No.
But to go to the terror thing, this is an interesting thing. Guns didn't make those people kill San Bernardino innocents. Radical Islam did. So the argument over the guns pulls him out of that. It's also with suicide, when he talks about suicide, you don't kill yourself because of a gun. You kill yourself with a gun.
Yeah, but
So
you
you focus on the with the
easy
gun.
access to the gun and more easily kill
Background
yourself.
checks will not stop suicide.
No. Well, I'm just saying, but we don't want
unless
to
your doctor stops you.
suicide.
You know what background checks are also doing?
Tell me.
You hate gun ownership. You hate the proliferation of gun ownership in America, right?
Yeah.
Numerous times you said
access.
300 million
Yes.
guns in America. It's too many. You know what's happening with all this gun control talk? People are flocking to buy guns right now.
That's true.
Background 44 a minute in 2050. 44 background checks
He's like
a
the
minute
best
in
thing to
2050.
happen to the gun lobby.
and
They're
gun
like, hey,
ownership.
we're getting results. Yeah, because
You know what
people are worried about the gun
lobby
grab
is
and the
exploiting-
infringement on the Second Amendment.
There is no infringement. Even the NRA said
Ay, ay,
today,
ay.
you mean after all these years,
Good
this
transition.
is so thin.
Good
That
transition.
is.
The president also tore into the gun lobby and he accused groups like the NRA of holding Congress hostage. He doesn't see why there would be a divide over his proposals.
But I also believe that we can find ways to reduce gun violence consistent with the Second Amendment. How did this become such a partisan issue? Even the NRA used to support expanded background checks. And by the way, most of its members still do. Most Republican voters still do. How did we get here? How did we get to the place where people think requiring a comprehensive background check means taking away people's guns?
And then the NRA put out a statement following the speech saying the president's proposed actions will be, quote, ripe for abuse by his administration and won't allow law-abiding gun owners to become scapegoats for his failed policies. Now, there was a big old when he said earlier in the soundbite.
Look, he politicized this. He's the one. No, Juan. He brazenly said it's time. Whenever there's a tragedy, you've got to politicize this. But I'll give you. I think we can meet in one mid area, Juan, if you will. A lot of this is all about suspicion. The left is suspicious of the right, and the right is suspicious of the left. We don't trust President Obama. We think that every small step is leading to a bigger, absolute thing, like a ban. It's the same way the left feels about the right on abortion. That every little twist or turn at the edges is going to lead to a reversal of Roe v. Wade. Right. It's exactly a mirror. We don't trust each other, so that's why there's no bipartisanship on this stuff.
Well, I think there's no bipartisanship because you have an NRA out there that has directly...
And you have Planned Parenthood. See my point?
What?
They're the
you
same.
Think Planned Parenthood spends as much as the NRA? No. Not even close.
You know what I mean.
Oh, no, I get your point. I'm there. But, okay. I do get your point. I hear you, but I'm just saying I think the suspicion is a legitimate point you're making, but I don't think in terms of counting the money and the political power, I don't think it's even comparable. I will say this. Talk about smart guns. Why don't people come together in the idea that, yeah, we can have trigger that recognize people,
yeah.
We can have chip IDs, we can do lots of things that would in fact
all
lower
infringing on your Second Amendment rights.
I know, but I guess my
you
point
can still own a gun.
Juan, what will you do?
Yes.
You know, you and the individuals that have your same beliefs. What will you do when you get what you want, perhaps someday, and still the violence, the terrorism, the mass shootings happen?
I'd say, well, we have a Second Amendment and the court has affirmed it, so we have to live. But I don't think we have to live in the dark ages, Kimberly, without smart guns, without improving the technology, without making an effort to keep it out of people, keep guns out of hands of people who shouldn't have it.
They will get the guns.
Final thought before we go.
Sure. I would say that this is fairly remarkable today that he had this big of a outpouring, and then on Thursday, that's in 2 days. It's been a long week, and it's only Tuesday. He's going to have the town hall and in Virginia. He's going to talk about this. So this is the lead up to his State of the Union address. The State of the Union is where you say, this is the State of the Union, and these are my proposals and my ideas for the next 12 months, my last year in office. But this is at a time when less than 2% of people say that gun violence and ownership is their #1 concern. Their #1 concern is terrorism, ISIS, and the economy, as it should be.
Where's that town hall Thursday?
Virginia.
Very interesting, right?